Hello, everybody, and welcome to another talk. Today, I'm joined by Edith Hathaway, well-known author and Vedic astrologer. Particular interest of mine is astrology. We cover this topic quite a lot on this channel. So I think before I start, I'll just give a little bit of background on how I know Edith, because it's quite an interesting story. I was when I was writing my Jyotish book back in I think it was 2015. It was a follow-on from a previous book I'd done, which had covered a little bit of astrology, and the publisher had asked me to expand on that, bridge it and make an entire book on Jyotish. And of course, that was quite a daunting task. I always felt it needed a read over just to make sure it was okay, so to speak. And very kindly, a mutual friend of ours asked Edith if she'd have a look at it, and she kind of saved my bacon, really. She sort of went through it, found all the small details and sort of tidied it up, and kind of found things that I'd sort of glossed over or missed or hadn't quite got my head around. So I'm eternally grateful for you for doing that. And so today I'm going to ask Edith. She's going to do a little bit of a talk about her background and the work that she's been doing. And we've got a sort of special, slightly unusual our normal run-of-the-mill interview, because we're going to actually look at some charts, which I don't normally do. But as I've got Edith here, and she's an exceptionally good Vedic astrologer, it'd be good for people to see how she's working and how she's interpreting charts. So before we sort of plow into the more technical side of the interview, perhaps you'd like to give people a bit of background about how you got into Jyotish and your interest in it. Just generally, how did you find it and how are you using it, those kind of things?
Well, I would say that I did not grow up surrounded by astrology at all. It wasn't in my family, none of my friends, just the horoscope columns, things like that, which I didn't take that seriously. And then it wasn't until the mid-70s I encountered it. And then, that was when I was living, actually, I grew up in New England, that area. And I lived in England for up until the mid-70s, and it was there I kind of had my first brush with astrology and tarot and some of these metaphysical approaches. And they were scary, actually, initially, because it turned out that they were true. They were accurate, and I thought, well, how could anybody do that? So I started studying astrology, and for 4 years, I consider myself more of a student. And I officially announced my practice about the end of 1980, 81. I was taking off, but it was confusing because I was much more involved in the performing arts. I was in a lot of music. That's the last thing I was doing, and making a living at other things, and working in publishing. With books and day jobs in libraries or publishing companies or things like that. But I was deeply involved in performing piano. I was a pianist, and composing, and before that I'd been in theater and dance and all these things. So that was much more my orientation. And then it came to that turning point. I had quite a gifted mentor who told me, this was 1980, kind of clenched things because I was performing and all that. And it was kind of a little bit of a tug of war, like, which way do I go? And he said that, and this was something quite famous, actually. It took about 2 years to get in to see him. And he said, oh, you have to do this. You have to do this astrology. There's no way around it. I would have told you this 10 years ago. Well, 10 years earlier, wouldn't have made any sense, because I had nothing around me. So the timing was right, shall we say. So that's where it began. And I began, like many of us in the West, with Western tropical astrology, because I knew nothing about Vedic. I mean, I just hadn't encountered it. And I didn't encounter it until literally a Jupiter cycle later. A Jupiter cycle after I had started studying in the first place. So 1988, I came across Vedic astrology quite well, as I've described it to some other people. Like, it came at me. I didn't seek it out. There was a client of mine who said that she insisted that I find this situation that a Vedic astrologer had predicted absolutely accurately. And she was, funnily enough, talk about destiny. she was annoyed that it didn't show up in Western tropical astrology.
Oh, I see.
She
So
was annoyed.
she'd had a Vedic reading, and then she was looking.
Right. She had come to me, I think, before. I can't remember that part of the story. But she'd been obviously knew mostly Western tropical. And maybe she'd been to me before that part, I don't remember. But the astrology she had gone to in Los Angeles was Chakapani Ula,
Okay.
who later became my mentor, colleague, and great good friend. At certain points, we were talking daily. It's just, he was a very important mentor. But so he had made this prediction, and at the time, I said, "Oh, I'll roll up my sleeves." I had all these methods. I'd studied Uranian astrology quite in depth, and astrocartography, and all the basics of Western tropical. But I couldn't find it. I couldn't find how he got this very exact thing. And so I promptly booked an appointment with him, and kind of took off from there because I was impressed. And of course, the sidereal zodiac, I guess your viewers would have to know that. So when we get to the charts, we'll make that double point that, hey, we're looking at sidereal, the planets in the sidereal zodiac. So that was different. I had to see my chart in a whole different way. And it made a lot of sense. I mean, I could see the other one, but I could see this one and those also. This very deep, unbroken history, because of course, Western astrology got broken up by different, invasions and this and that and the other. The traditions got broken, basically dependent on Greek and Roman roots. But the Vedic had a long, continuous tradition and very, very deep spiritual roots, whereas Western astrology was always seemed to be kind of trying to find its spiritual roots. So yeah, all of these were very, very powerful factors that won me over. So and ironically, it was the same year that I wrote, I think earlier that year, I wrote or was in the process of writing my first and only, as it would turn out, my swan song to Western tropical astrology, called Navigating by the Stars, The Art of Decision Making. So that came out in 1991, but I actually wrote it in 1988 and spent a couple of years trying to find a publisher, did find Llewellyn in 1990.
Does it specialize in a particular type? Is that just a general introductory to tropical? Or is it?
It's general introductory, but it's got some astrocartography in there, which had not been really much written about at all.
Okay.
With a nice testimonial from Jim Lewis, who was the king of astrocartography, really brought that into being in the West. And yeah, some astronomical stuff, and then some mundane astrology. I wrote about Pluto, and I used Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto a little bit, if they are near something close or when they change signs. And I will mention that because Uranus has just entered Taurus quite recently, so that's a sidereal Taurus, so that's of interest. But generally speaking, I have moved over into classic Vedic astrology using, I'm South Indian oriented, so much more dependent on the Navamsha chart than looking at all the divisional charts. So I wasn't eager to go whole hog into every possible area of Vedic astrology. You know what I mean? It's like, wait, at a certain point, you have to simplify and drill down. And that was kind of where I was at more. Although I did, I have looked at various areas of Vedic astrology, and especially with the tutelage of Chakapani, who especially taught me his whole, because his family were astrologers. They were family of, there's a name for that. There's a name for that, but the whole family, the grandfather, the father, they were a family of astrologers. So they had their tradition, and in their tradition, they had a way of looking at Graha Yuddha, which is a planetary war, and very, deeply respectful of the classical traditions, but finding their own conclusions. And this came out of, and I was so fortunate because I would say to him, look, if I had problems with anything, I would say, look, I'm not getting this to work. How does it work? Or how does so I got deeper into the Navamsha. Consequently, I was asked more than anybody else I've got about, I don't know, it seems like 6 or 7 lectures I did on Navamsha, because Chakapani made it clearer to me, okay, this is how it works. And it's not, it says at the top on the computer programs, Dharma, spouse, but it's way more than that. So and also he instructed me in Nadi Jyotisha, which I use somewhat, but not, as in full detail. So yeah, it was a little confusing initially, and I certainly didn't think I would be changing systems. But by the early 90s I was. And also I was just about to publish a book on Western tropical astrology. So
it's really strange, isn't it? Because you just got to that point where you've written the book on Western astrology, and it's kind of your jumping ship and sort of starting down another path again.
Yes. And and I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico from New York City because I was with someone who wanted to move there. And we arrived, and I think I told you the story. We arrived in Santa Fe driving from Manhattan, where I'd lived for 6 years after living in London for 6 years. No, it was 6 or 7, maybe 7 years in New York City. And we arrived in Santa Fe, New Mexico, driving from the East Coast. As it turned out later, the exact same day that David Frawley arrived from the West Coast. And he was my initial tutor there. So I was very grateful for that. Of course, a very renowned Vedic astrologer. And he was very kind to talk with me numerous afternoons when he was free. And for Sanskrit scholar, all of that, all his wide range of things he's published. So he was way further. But I knew him socially. It's just that I didn't, for a couple of years, I didn't connect with the Vedic astrology. And for his part, he was delighted because it was a convert. So I was well known in the Western tropical world. And I guess they hoped that I would bring over more people. So in other words, I was conversant in both, and many times people who are watching or listening to you, all they know is the tropical, because that's what they're surrounded with, and that's the taste.
I mean, it must have been. I've never studied Western. I know very little about Western. I've got friends or one particular lady I know who's very good at it, and other people I've run into who practice. But I've not had that background, so for me, it's never really an issue. I don't have to unthink anything.
Right, like you.
But I hear, a lot of other people I know that have come that way. They'll have started Western and sort of gone into and one of two things happens. They either seem to sort of completely stop using the Western and just concentrate on the Vedic, or they sort of, most of the people I've interviewed on this channel, they've said, when I asked them the question, so when you look at the chart, are you looking at it with a Western mindset or a Vedic mindset? Which approach? And they'll say it varies, but it's usually sort of like 25% Western and then 75% Vedic. They're concentrating on the Indian, but they've always got that that sort of discipline is still in the mind. They're still thinking about the outer planets and aspects and things like that. So it's
yeah, we do have aspects. I'm not as loose as some. I say some of my colleagues let everything trine or square or so forth. It's where maybe the influence of Chakapani and some of the other astrologers in India. I am more classically oriented. And also, to me, the fact that only classically Jupiter is allowed to trine. I know there are many, I think in the Jaimini, that say, oh no, Rahu Ketu should be allowed to trine as well. And they get good results. Okay, good for them. I just, I'm not saying, well, you shouldn't do that. It's just interesting how Jupiter is the planet of forgiveness and benevolence and can bestow blessings, right? So Rahu was not like Jupiter. So it's like giving Rahu the same aspect as Jupiter, just to me, on a spiritual level, doesn't quite make sense.
No, I've never used that.
So I go with the classical. So with that one, I go with the classical, and I just use it. I don't debate with myself. Oh, is this ecumenical? No, just follow the rules that have been established. So Saturn, the special aspects. Saturn can aspect the 3rd, the 7th, and the 10th from itself. That's it. Now, if it's in, like it's in the 10th house from the moon, yes, where is it? What house is it in from the moon or the dasha lagna, you know, the ascendant, which is the dasha lord at the time, then yes, that's, oh, I'll look at that for sure. But
how about
aspects are,
that switch between the Western interpretation of the nodes and the Vedic interpretation? Did you find that kind of largely different? I don't know if they're, because I've always heard Western, they're interpreted slightly differently.
you better use, you know, be in one lane or the other, because otherwise you're gonna like, oh, have I said, is this the right word in this language, or is it really the other one? If you're always in a state of wondering, then it's going to be difficult to come to your conclusions. So Rahu Ketu, I mean, Rahu expands and it has a centrifugal kind of action, and and Ketu is moksha oriented, it pushes you inward. So it's a centripetal action. And yet you could say, well, they're both affecting the same planets. Well, then you have to go a little further and all of that. But no, I don't debate with myself. I follow the classical rules, okay. Usually Parashara rules. Some, you know, some Jaimini, you'll see I'll bring in some Jaimini, like the Atmakaraka in a couple cases here are pretty important.
Okay. So you trained, you met Chakrapani, you did your study. So how long before you sort of felt confident to go out there and actually, you know, market yourself as a Vedic astrologer?
Oh, you know, that transition was taking place from 88 into the early 90s. And I can't tell you the specific date, but my clients would be pretty much like, I announced to them what I was doing, and I let them off the hook. Hey, if you're not comfortable with this, I understand. But most said, hey, I'll come with you, whatever you're doing. Right. So they were having faith that if I changed my methods and if I was still getting good results and the best results, then what I mean is the best results for them. I don't mean to in any way put down Western astrology. I found it the best for me. Now, I did find my detractors, you know, people that were suspicious of a system. I remember one person said to me, well, it's not your culture, right? Well, but I gravitated to it. Now, what is my culture? You know, Greek Roman. Is it Greek Roman, or do we consider that past lives are who knows? Maybe I had a past life in India.
I mean, looking through the text, if you comb back through the old texts, I mean, particularly the very old ones, you can see that there are obviously cultural crossovers. You know, they even talk about, I think one text even honors the Greeks as being particularly good astrologers. So they're all aware of each other and their information was exchanging hands. So I never really get into the debate about where's this come from or who actually owns it. But I see it as a kind of cross-pollination. If you look at a lot of the astrology that was going on at that time, like I say, particularly the old Indian texts, you can draw a lot of comparisons to other texts. You know, I think like the Yavana Jataka, it's like the what is it? The astrology of the Greeks, I think, is it like a sort of.
Yeah, what do they call them now? I almost can't remember the name. Is the Yajnas, or the people they call the foreigners, the foreign astrologers?
Yeah.
It began with Y.
Yeah, well, it could be Yavana because like Yavana Jataka, it could be like
the
Greeks.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Like the foreigners, they ask as anybody outside of their culture, but they did honor them as being particularly.
Well, yeah. Look at the 12th house. Is you guys, your foreign residents, your outcasts, which is of course another meaning for Rahu Ketu in the planetary cabinet. But there's a lot in Vedic astrology that's coming out of Hinduism, it seems to me, especially with all the deities and so much of the sacred. I just find a great depth of sacred orientation. People say that about Bali, where Hinduism, I've never been there, but you know, where they have all the altars and the devotees to the different, you know, the deities for so many different things, and honoring it's basically honoring the sacredness of life, which is quite an interesting thing right now because that's being challenged. You know, so many people are departing the organized religions. So, and there's so much orientation against the spiritual life or religious life. So I think in that way, astrologers are keepers of the flame in a way. You're oriented towards a sacred view of life by nature of what you do.
And how about when you were studying? Were there kind of nakshatras quite a big part of what you were doing early on? I mean, because I find it's kind of, I think we'd had this conversation recently. I was speaking to another astrologer, and I was just saying, when I was looking back through a lot of the texts, I found very little information. It was like really hard to get a handle on them, and yet, you know, they've become so popular now. There's so many. It's like they've become their own kind of part of Vedic astrology that's been moved to the forefront. You know, it's people really kind of specializing in them. But like I said, I was really sort of scratching around to try and find any depth that to kind of flesh them out.
Right.
How did you?
Right. It's not easy. David Frawley has some of the best material on that, I think. And I still carry around the sheets with all the, the keywords and the Shakti, which is the key energy of that nakshatra and the key symbols of it. So these same very, you could say, where we could do with more material, but it's like so much of Vedic astrology is condensed codes of meanings. Look at the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions all in Hasta in 1980, 81. That which you can hold in your hand. Guess what? The cell phone came in. And the computer, the laptop computer, no longer the mainframe, but things you could carry around that you could communicate with. Hasta, the hand. So, amazing codes.
And mercurial.
Yes, ruled by Mercury. So there's our clue there.
Yeah.
But Hasta, okay, communicate, but okay, so what does a hand have to do with it? Well, handheld.
Yeah.
You can work it with your hands. You got a keyboard.
We should mention here that you're, I know we were joking about it, but I said you're a bit of a specialist in mundane astrology. So this is looking at world events rather than doing individuals charts. It's looking, you'd elect a time for, or you'd have the time for a nation was founded, and then from that you would read the chart, like the birth of America, the birth of England, or something like that, at 1066, or as you said, I can't remember the date, 1776.
1776.
So you would kind of draw that chart, and then you'd be reading the fate of the country as if it was a birth chart sort of thing. And you're a bit of a, well, not bit, you're a specialist for this kind of work. I just across the board, I know you say everyone should have a good, I think, isn't it Vedically you're supposed to be able to do prajna, should answer questions, Muhurta elect proper time.
Yeah, no, I do all of that.
Yeah.
It's not like I don't do, nobody's paying me to do them. If I were a court astrologer, I guess in the old days, I'd be doing all those charts, but you'd also be doing charts of, birth charts of individuals. So it's not like I don't do those, and we'll discuss a few of them in a moment. But so it's, yeah.
Which do you prefer? What's your main, if you had a choice, and if is there one that you prefer over the other?
Well, here's the way I look at it. Because it kind of struck me when you said, "Oh, she's a specialist in this."
Definitely,
I told
100%.
Yeah. No, see, when I moved to Santa Fe, and then I was doing astrology, and then Ariel Gutman, who's a friend and colleague who now lives in Greece still, I believe, but she moved to Santa Fe in mid '80s and initiated a group of astrologers, and we would do these. I think it was called the Astrology Forum. I don't know if it still exists, but every December, we would do a December event, I think we called it. And my gosh, we'd pack a hall of over 300 people. And we had Alan Oken was living in Santa Fe then. He was a big hit, of course, big draw. And there would be about 7 or 8 of us. Marcia Stark, who's, again, they're all Western tropical except for me. I was initially, and then I moved over, so whatever I was doing, right? But we would roll up our sleeves and talk about local politics, state politics, national, and we just dive in and say, well, here's what we think is going to happen, or we talk about outer planet transits and
One at a time, would you all confer?
I don't know if we told each other what we're going to say in advance, but there'd be a theme. There'd be a theme like, okay, this is the big, yeah, it'd be divided up. Like, okay, you're going to talk about this, you get that one, you get that one. So it wasn't like we all discussed the same thing, but I mention it just because not only was it quite a fun and interesting thing to do, but when you say specialist, I think, well, shoot, we're all doing it. But then to make your daily, to make your living, we were doing charts of individuals. So
yeah, of course.
Yeah, nobody was saying, oh, would you please do my company chart? I mean, I have done those. And one of my colleagues, whom I still am in touch with, Bill Cerubi, who's also known as Bill Meridian. He's a professional trader, financial advisor. He's very high up there, and he's written some great books. Like what I have around, he's written a book on eclipses. He's written great stuff. I mean, in other words, there's some very influential astrologers who are well known by Wall Streeters. He's one of them. He's one of them. He used to be on regularly. I don't know if he is now. He's done a lot of astrology in the Middle East. So I'm glad to be, friends with him still. I don't think he pays that much attention to Vedic astrology, but I think it works on a personal basis. He likes me and he trusts me. So I guess he's interested in what I may have to say. But it doesn't mean that I blend the two. It just means, okay, this is the sidereal zodiac, and here's what I think about it.
I think I meant to say more that although on top of the kind of mundane, you're actually doing quite a unique, you're sort of looking at larger and smaller cycles within like planetary conjunctions coming back, particularly like Jupiter and Saturn conjoining sort of every 20 years, and it's the sign that they're conjoining in and the nakshatra that they're in, and it's sort of, there's these sort of cycles that go on. I mean, we were looking at some charts you were showing me, they go back sort of hundreds of years, and you can kind of like predict forward and predict backwards, and they go through different elements. And I mean, that's quite specialized stuff. I don't think I've ever come across any.
Yeah, no, I don't think, no, I wanted to do that. And also, yes, in my book, In Search of Destiny, I wanted to include a larger, because it's a book essentially about the ascendant charts of individuals, Aries through Pisces. And there will be a second volume of that.
So this is like the second segment now. So we're gonna look at some charts, and Edith's gonna talk us through. And so we've picked sort of three unusual, I wouldn't say controversial, but just obviously outstanding characters in this particular time. So these are three. How would you describe them? They're kind of obviously
independent journalists, in some cases who've been in print, and currently the three of them are also, I can't say TV, although one of them has been TV, but you would, what do you call that? YouTube, Spotify,
social media.
What is that called? Independent
podcasting.
media. Independent media.
Independent media and podcast.
It's called independent media. So I guess the title of this would be Independent Journalists on Independent Media.
Yeah.
Who in one case was in mainstream television.
Mainstream, yeah. What was interesting, doing a little bit of background for this today, we were just kind of looking up some of the numbers, and it was just amazing how big these audiences that follow these journalists are. I mean, it's incredible. It's sort of dwarfing anything that's possible in mainstream media. So you're seeing a shift, aren't you, globally? People are kind of moving away from the regular. I mean, we see that here in the UK as well. You know, that the media channels are struggling to retain viewers and sort of independence, and it's just cutting through, and it's become a whole sort of genre in its own right. So yeah, very interesting. But anyway, let's go ahead and have a look at some. So I'm going to go ahead and share. So should we say the first one up? We're going to look at, this is Joe wrote.
Yeah. So for you viewers or listeners, I guess you need to view this one. So the North Indian chart is on the right, the South is on the left. And this is sidereal zodiac, as everybody should know. And these numbers are in American style. So that's August. He's born Friday, August 11th.
Yeah.
1967
Yeah.
at 0:05. In other words, just 5 minutes after midnight
Yeah.
in Newark, New Jersey. Birth certificate, yeah, from
Okay.
Astro Data Bank. Yeah, at first, when I looked initially, it wasn't there, so somebody must have put it there recently. In any case, it's that birth certificate was in hand. It's, one of those. So this is quite accurate.
Okay.
And I know you were mentioning initially, well, gee, there's hardly any planets in the angles. This is Taurus ascending.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming now you have the,
I got my mouse on
you
it.
have the pointer, but it says, yeah, AS is where the ascendant is.
Yeah.
And I'm going to assume, should I assume that your viewers know how to read either north or south, or should I give a little bit of a intro?
I think what we'll do is because you kindly created on your website, you've got a little introductory to explain how both.
I do.
I'll
On the
put
articles.
the link on there. I'll put the link on. So
Yeah, how to read a North or South Indian chart. On the houses, on the North Indian, the houses and signs are always in the same position. So Pisces in the upper left, followed by Aries, Taurus. So the ascendant in this case is Taurus, which is ruled by Venus. And we have a very powerful, there are themes which I'm going to bring up in each of these. We got 3 people, so I'll be mindful that we won't want to linger too long in any one of them, but of all 3, Joe Rogan has the biggest audience and apparently earns over $100,000 per episode. And that was on Spotify, correct?
Yeah, those figures they were giving were Spotify, but that's across all medias. I think even on his Instagram account, it was a ridiculously high, 50 million, something stupid. It was incredible.
So we could say, okay, so what does astrology have to? Well, when I started looking at this, and we're looking at this, roller coaster year, which is a pivotal year of 2024, and these people, notably Rogan, but also the second person, are doing incredibly well. And because people want to hear what they have to say. And so you could say, well, why aren't they listening to, mainstream news? Well, obviously they're providing something that mainstream news is not. And in fact, can be kind of tenuous, treacherous situations for truth tellers on mainstream news. They can be fired, they could be deplatformed, all kinds of things, because we have a lot of censorship going on, as we know from YouTube, and so these people are on the cutting edge of all of that. So they have to have a certain amount of ability to risk their reputations and an ability to get people to connect with them despite all of this situation.
So you just say for people looking at this, also this, so the software you're using here is the Sri Jyoti Star software, and it allows you to play lots of different styles. And if you see something underlined, it means it's retrograde. It means it's for our point.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes. So notice that even though it's a Taurus ascendant, no planets in the angles of the chart of the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th houses as we go around clockwise in the South Indian chart, but in the North Indian chart, it's going to be counterclockwise from the ascendant. So it's just the reverse. And as Andrew said, I have brief guides to this. At the top of my article section, I always have the brief guide, how to read a South Indian and a North Indian chart. So if you want to go back over that later, or before you review this.
Yeah, and there's nothing we should say. There's no real advantage or disadvantage to either. They have their benefits. Both are equally good, but it's quite often how you're trained, isn't it? Your kind of initial foray into this system is kind of what sets the sequence up. I don't really meet a lot of Vedic astrologers who use either or. I know we can all kind of read both. We can muddle our way through on the other one, but I don't really know anyone who's super fluent on both.
Right. No, usually you choose your lens. I was trained with Chakapani, who was South Indian, and reading the B.V. Raman books, and he's South Indian. So, and David Frawley was using South Indian. So that's kind of where I started. But as a courtesy, we understand that as a courtesy, we always provide the North Indian. The next chart, we'll do 2 south just to show you the Navamsha and how powerful that is. But one of the things that I noticed in all of these, like, okay, what characteristics does it take for a person in this era who can, he's in a certain amount of danger, actually, for conveying messages that the mainstream doesn't want you to convey, and reach a lot of people. And Joe Rogan, as well as our second person, they have tried to get rid of them. There was a guy who I don't want to jump ahead of the story there, but was it quite recently in early 2022, after he had interviewed Dr. Peter McCullough, one of the frontline doctors who was speaking an alternative line, certainly to Dr. Fauci and the others, about the whole COVID situation, the COVID vaccines, his protocols. And shortly after that, what was the name of the musician? We looked up
Neil Young, I think it was, wasn't it?
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. I used to listen to Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young way back. They were a good group. But anyway, Neil Young is still out there. Neil Young objected, and he said he threatened to withdraw all his music off Spotify. And the CEO and founder of Spotify, Daniel Ek, who lives in Sweden, Swedish, decided no, that he'd rather keep Rogan because guess what? Rogan reaches so many viewers, 3 billion listeners.
Not particularly a hard decision to make, but
earns over 100,000 per episode. But not just dollars and money, but also the principle of free speech. And very interesting, just within the same time period, within 2 months, in April of 2022, you have Elon Musk buying up more shares of Twitter to buy out Twitter. So all this was happening in 2022, making it a little bit safer ground, more fertile ground for people like Rogan and our second person. So what I've noticed with these charts, and I'll just, obviously we can't be encyclopedic here with people in this category, or do a full out chart analysis. But what I would like to do is point out, if you were going to find what were the features, in my opinion, that make these people, and Rogan would appear to be the top of the list at this point, so popular and successful, phenomenally successful with a very large public. And the first thing I'd have to point to, and this is a common factor with all three, is a very strong Venus. And this Venus is, you can't tell by you can tell that it's retrograde, but it is actually, it's within 1 minute or to being exactly on the stationary retrograde degree. And it's also in its own nakshatra. Venus is in Purva Falguni nakshatra, so that strengthens it further. It's not ideal in the sign of the sun, but it is greatly strengthened by being almost stationary. And also it is Digbala. Digbala means best possible angle from either the moon or the ascendant, in this case, Taurus ascendant. So it already has those characteristics. And plus you have 3 planets. And this is another characteristic of these 3 charts, is you've got one of the luminaries, or both, in the sign ruled by Venus. So if the sign lord, so in other words, your landlord, is powerfully positioned, then all of these planets in turn, Mars, Ketu, Moon, are also very powerful, because their sign lord is so strong. Right? And actually you have a second planet, Saturn, which of course is Raja Yoga Karaka for Venus ruled chart, Taurus or Libra. Venus is also close to its stationary retrograde degree within 15-minute orb.
I was going to just say we should say when you say Raj Yoga, because on this, well, it's easier for me to see because it's a North Indian chart, not for you. But the 10th and the 11th are ruled by Saturn, so it's when a planet rules a Kendra and a Trikona, isn't it, or both together? Like
right, when they right, because you have Vishnu rules the angles, and Lakshmi provides all the abundance and the fertility and the luxuries, and the good fortune, and that's the trinal houses. And of course, the ascendant is both trinal and angular. So it's the ruler of the ascendant is always considered fortunate. So this ruler of the ascendant, Digbala station. So it's powerful Venus.
Yeah.
And notice it's in the 11th house. 11th house, of course, a great financial house from the moon.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah. So
I was going to say also, I'd noticed, this is just one thing I've noticed, Venus always does better if it's behind the sun. So if the sun rises first, it's better. If Venus can get up late, it's not being chased at dawn by the sun. It's always a bit more of a laid back.
Is there a classical rule on that, or is it?
No, it's just something I found. But I always find the ones when there's Venus is ahead of the sun and it's got to get up first, it's not quite so congenial. It's sort of like it has to get out of bed early and start setting the court up before the sun rises. Whereas if the sun's up first, Venus can have a lie-in.
Interesting. So notice that there's a trinal relationship. I hinted at this earlier. Jupiter and Saturn are both in water signs, and Jupiter is exalted, right? Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. Next to Mercury. Now, notice I'm not featuring Mercury here. You think, oh, communicator, journalist, she's going to be featuring Mercury. Well, Mercury needs to be strong. Mercury is not at its best in a water sign. We know that because it's debilitated in Pisces. It can get distracted with emotional matters. And of course, Rogan, he hasn't done this all his life. He's done other things, but we're kind of focusing on he's been in the martial arts, he's been a comedian, all of this. But when Mercury is aspected or conjoined Jupiter, there's a lot of speech. So if you've got a TV journalist who's I say TV journalists, in other words, independent media journalists that we're speaking of here. And they're talking a lot. You'd better have a good Jupiter-Mercury situation because it gives them, to use the common expression, gift of the gab. In other words, it's an abundant, they have no problem speaking a lot, with a lot of exchange. And notice from the moon, you've got a great chart there. From the moon, sun is in the 10th house, Digbala, Jupiter and Mercury. You've got exalted Jupiter in the 10th house from the moon. So first of all, strong Venus, strong moon. And moon is not in an ideal house from the ascendant. It's in the 6th house, but very competitive. He's a competitor.
Yeah, fighting.
Mars is well positioned in the 6th house, aspects the ascendant, aspects the 4th, 7th, and 8th from itself. Mars profits by being in the sign of Venus because Venus is so strong. Mars is in Swati. So Swati nakshatra is the nakshatra of independence. So Swati and Ketu, I think, Ketu and Mars are both in Swati nakshatra. And moon is in Chitra, the jewel. So all of these, so a strong moon, I would say, if I had to list number one, strong Venus, strong moon, on my list here, I've also, because you have to be so assertive. Now you could say this about so many careers, but to be inventive and assertive and keep moving because you're in a field, the news, right? It's 24-hour. 7 days a week, 24 hours, you'll do better to have a certain number of planets, preferably a majority of planets in Chara. Chara is cardinal in the West. So Aries, Libra, Cancer, Capricorn. So that's another feature I'm seeing either in the birth chart or the Navamsha, and sometimes both.
All right.
So
I was going to say also, he early on in his career, he was, well, I don't know whether he still does it, but he was a stand-up comic as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mentioned he's a comedian. So in other words, a lot of talk, right? A lot of talk. And presumably, now we were looking before to see, he has not written any book. Third house is writing. He's got all of those planets. I would say also another thing, now this is not shown on any of our charts, but I can just tell for the audience. This Sarvashtaka Varga, these are Bindu points. And in the case of Rogan, he has 39 Bindu points on his ascendant, which is way above average. The 20s, you know, you're doing okay, 25 to 30 is starting to be above average. If you have in the 40s or 39, our next person has 37 in the ascendant, very powerful. So in other words, there's something I actually think it's a very demanding component, because the person is already commanding so much attention that let's hope they have some content to match.
Well, he certainly seems to have that when you listen to him on the show. I can't claim to be an aficionado on Joe Rogan, but on the shows that I've made it through, I occasionally actually make it through because they're incredibly long, aren't they? They go on for maybe
3 hours. 3 hours.
Sometimes I have on one or two occasions made it to the end, but I like those kind of dip in ones where they show maybe 15, 20 minutes as like an edited highlight on YouTube. And he's genuinely funny. And what I find quite amazing is he's not just, you think he's just kind of nodding and not really, it's almost like he's not following along, but then he'll ask a really pointed question that you really did understand the subject and very deeply.
Yes, no, that amazes me too. And I confess I'm not like a devotee of Joe Rogan. But it does interest me that, it's not like I've watched all his shows, but people have drawn my attention to him. So there's certain shows I was very interested to see how he was going to handle it. And also notice that water I was saying, and you'll see this when I do my my presentation, the larger cycles of Jupiter, Saturn, predominating in the water signs, that this kind of goes with him because it takes longer for water to gestate. So, I think he's a first in doing 3. Isn't that his standard length? 3 hours? I was amazed to see.
They were 2.5, 3 hours. Quite. I said, I'm not an expert on his shows, but the ones occasionally I'll flick through and just have a look back on the catalogue if there's a particular. Sometimes there were some people he interviewed very early on that interested me quite a lot, and they were very good interviews. Sort of alternative archaeologists, and he sort of likes the more bizarre stuff. There's no doubt about it. He's not.
No, he must study. He must do some research. Not exhaustive, but I agree with you. He'll come up with, well, he's looking into this a little bit.
Yeah.
So he'll question the person, and somehow or rather, see, this is where I keep hammering on this Venus, because he'll deal with things which are controversial in the so-called. In other words, people have different opinions on the subjects of the people he's interviewing, but somehow the Venus. It's a passionate planet. It's not a planet of peace, but it's a planet of diplomacy and the arts and aesthetics. And it's so interesting to me that Venus is the most powerful factor in all these charts, not Mercury. Mercury's in there.
Yeah.
Usually connected with Jupiter, so they can talk a lot. I wouldn't say he's the most elegant speaker.
No, it's quite feisty.
Yes, of course, yes, coarse language, not everybody's cup of tea, but apparently a cup of tea for a lot of people because they're relating to him. And maybe they're not intimidated because he comes, I don't want to say he's coming down to a certain level, but he doesn't hesitate to use coarse language. That is a factor. Strong Mars is another. The energy to do what they're doing, right? They've got, and of course, he's been in the martial arts.
Mm.
So notice the moon, Mars, and that's with Ketu. So he's had some back and forth, right? It's not like he spent his life in martial arts, but I mean, you've got a certain longevity for that. But
Mm.
he's, after he finished his career, then he was doing commentator, right,
Yeah.
for martial arts.
Could you
And,
also, I was just going to say also, K2 is always things that are very mixed. It's like Mishra, it's like blended things. So the fact is his martial arts style is very mixed. It's mixed style, isn't it? That particular.
Good point.
Yeah, so it's like mixed style of martial arts, isn't it? Like K2 Mars, it's a sort of a very kind of, it's not pure metals, it's like alloys, blended metals.
Well, I didn't know, I knew that he did different ones, but that's an interesting, that I would say that's a valid interpretation of that. Plus, notice he's got, and this is another common theme, Dana yogas galore. These are yogas of wealth. Now, Chandra Mangala, Moon Mars, is a combination for wealth, either conjoined or in aspect to each other. But notice they've got a K2 in between. So there's some kind of complication or turbulence, right? Now, right now, we don't see it because he's raking it money. And Jupiter is in an angle from it. And also notice the moon in an angle from Jupiter, which is the well-known Gajakesari yoga, the elephant. And the lion makes a person popular. That's a very common combination. So we say strong Venus, strong moon, strong Mars. Sun, yeah, I mean, you don't want a weak sun. They don't necessarily have to be a leader. They have to be able to reach people and communicate in such a way that people will watch. They don't need to win an election, right? They just have to keep connecting with people so that people will keep tuning in and watching or listening.
And like sun in Cancer, a bit more kind of compassionate than, because the sun is like a malefic, isn't it? But being in Cancer sort of softens it a little bit.
Well, also notice that Jupiter is very combust there, but it is exalted. So maybe it pushes it up. But again, it's in the sign of the king and the queen, sun and moon are the luminaries. So the sun is in the sign of of another luminary. So I wouldn't say the sun is bad there. And it's in the sun is in Ashlesha, ruled by Mercury. So Mercury gets some extra push there. What I think this moon, and he's got it more than any of the others, the water connection, there's some emotional way that he connects with people that must account for this extraordinary popularity. Plus, if you could, there's a thing I want to show in the Navamsha chart. If you could bring that up, the south.
I'll stop sharing that one.
And that will show, if you will notice, and so these are two south, so we can show the Navamsha. So going clockwise from the Capricorn, Jupiter and Capricorn. So now you have Jupiter's gone from exalted to debilitated, but it's getting correction because moon is in an angle from the ascendant. So Jupiter's exalted in the moon's sign. So notice this 10th house, and there's a special rule. So 10th house going clockwise from Capricorn ascendant with Jupiter in it. Yeah. Moon, Mercury, Venus.
Yeah.
This is what you call an Amala Yoga times 3, tripled. Amala Yoga, Amala in Sanskrit means spotless. And if somebody has a benefic planet, in other words, a bright moon, which he has, Mercury, Jupiter, or Venus in the 10th house from the ascendant or moon, this is an Amala Yoga. And I don't think I've ever seen, and they can't be afflicted. Where they do get a Mars aspect, it's true. But I would say this is pretty stunning. And I would say, I've never seen a triple one.
So we should just say for people, so the Navamsha is a 9th divisional chart. So what we're doing here is we're looking at We're looking sort of zooming in on the ninth division,
Right,
and it's being
right,
really,
right. The
really.
ninth divisional. Yeah, there's a lot of divisional charts in the South Indian way of doing astrology. We tend to focus on the Navamsha more than any of the other divisional charts. And it's a confirmation of the birth chart. It's where you're going, especially, and you will see this with the second chart. And, it's always, so people say, well, when does it take place? Well, you're always moving towards it. So you look to see, well, is a planet, each individual planet and the chart as a whole, is a planet better, worse, or the same in the Navamsha? A lot of times it'll improve, which means that that planet, especially during its dasha, will be much less difficult than what it had promised to be in the birth chart, right? So, and yes, at the top of these computer charts, they always say Dharma and spouse, which it is as well. But the way that I look at this, wow, and also there's a Parivartana Yoga, mutual exchange of signs between Jupiter and Saturn. You could say, well, it's between the first and the 12th house. But notice that he came into his podcast. I was just looking at his dasha sequence here, and apparently his first big break happened in late 1994. I wasn't able to get the exact, but there's some show where he played it. Somebody, Girelli, a handyman. People would know that if they're followers of Joe Rogan. But apparently the show ran from about 95 to 99. Well, look at this. Look what dasha, and we know this because his chart is accurate. Birth time is accurate. He would have been in Jupiter, Venus dasha. Now, again, there's 55 dasha systems. This is the most important one, called the Vimshotri dasha. Vimshotri means 120, or as that is 120 years. It's considered to be an ideal length of time, which actually is mentioned in the Bible too. An ideal length of life. So he was in Jupiter, Venus from late 1995, and that show was his first big break. Well, look how Jupiter, I've just mentioned how strong Jupiter and Venus are, both in the birth chart and the Navamsha. And Jupiter, yes, Jupiter has a little trouble because it's exalted, but it's combust. But it's very well positioned in the 10th house from the moon in the birth chart. It's debilitated, but gets correction in the Navamsha chart. And it has this triple Amala Yoga in the 10th house from it.
Perhaps that's
with Venus in the 10th. So look at this. He comes into prominence in Jupiter, Venus for the first time.
Yeah.
And then he moves his show, the Joe Rogan Experience, apparently debuted on Christmas Eve day, December 24th of 2009. That was Saturn Ketu. Saturn Ketu, we'll look at Saturn Ketu is in the 12th house of his Navamsha in an exchange with the Jupiter. So that's first, second house kind of, Jupiter's in the second house from it. So he's, I would assume, starting to make pretty big money from then on.
Saying it was like, what was it? But on at the moment, it's roughly about $100,000 per episode, isn't it?
Well, that's currently, and I don't know what he was then, but that was the beginning of it.
Yeah.
And then I thought it was pretty interesting that when he got, apparently he didn't get taken up by Spotify until, it was the same date, December 24th, I believe it was 2020. And that was the last subperiod of Saturn, Jupiter, and look at Saturn, Jupiter. They're in a trine. They're in a trine in the birth chart, and they're in a Parivartana Yoga in the Navamsha. So he's currently now in Mercury Dasha. So, but notice from all these perspectives, looking at Mercury in Cancer as a Dasha Lagna, it's still strong because he's got Rahu in the 10th, Moon, Mars, Ketu aspecting the 10th, with a, the energy. This is what I mean, let's face it, you're not going to be following somebody who has low energy.
No.
I mean, he's relaxed. I got to say, he's relaxed.
Is that sort of, would you see that as a bit of a, because there's this thing around Venus, isn't it, being the kind of the guru of the demons, it's like kind of, he's got that.
Well, interesting. Yes. We should remind our audience that in the planetary cabinet, Venus and Jupiter were the advisor. They were both advisors to the king, but in larger mythology, Venus was advisor to the Asuras, the demons who knows how to, the secret to immortality and all those hidden secrets. And Jupiter was the advisor to the Devas, something hidden there. I mean, we don't tend to read Venus as vulgar, but that there's mythology. The mythology, and Venus isn't as great in Leo, but it's so strong in other ways that I've already outlined.
I think I was looking at mine earlier about his wife, because I thought, well, Venus, is the partner for male, and it was in the 4th house, and it was like so I was sort of expecting quite a strong character, and she looks like she's a pretty strong character. He credits her with being quite a, guiding influence behind him and supporting him, and sort of watching him from the sideline. So maybe there's a little bit in there as well.
Yes, the moon is the Darakaraka, or the planet of the lowest degree. One thing I did, because I don't know anything about I didn't research that part for this interview, but so I know he's married and I know he has children, but I was concerned because the 7th lord, which is the business and or marriage partner, 7th lord Mars is in the 6th house, which is the 12th house from the 7th. So there's a certain sacrifice there. It's not an ideal house placement for the owner of that house, if you see what I mean, if they're in the 12th. So that may be also true, that she has to sacrifice a lot for his, for the life that they lead.
Yeah, probably safety issues now, isn't it? You've got to start worrying if you get very rich partners, then obviously you become a target with children as well, kidnapping or all kinds of stuff,
Yeah, and the Darakaraka as well as in that 6th house. But but it makes sense because the Mars is competitive and the Mars does well in the 6th house. So there are other factors in, as I say, then the Navamsha. The Navamsha is better. Because the 7th lord is the moon and it goes to the 10th.
So are you in this using the system? Obviously, you're using the more like a south approach to Navamsha. I mean, so you're kind of using it basically like a birth chart. You're reading it exactly the same as if it's a birth chart. There's no aspect.
Yes, it doesn't replace it. For instance, so in my book In Search of Destiny, the birth chart, the destiny. The Dharma karmic destiny is based on that Taurus ascendant for him.
Right.
But then, and the way the chart is, the planetary positions from that chart. But you read this, I mean, in the training that I received, classical training from Chakapani and other, great Indian astrologers, you read the Navamsha very much like, yogas and everything, just like you would a birth chart. For instance, look at that Navamsha ascendant. It's got a Papakartri yoga around it. It's surrounded by malefics.
Right.
So it wasn't easy, even though it's Jupiter, but it's Jupiter debilitated.
Yeah.
But Jupiter has other advantages I've gone over. It's an exchange with Saturn, and it's Gajikesari yoga, and you've got these 3 benefic planets in the 10th, all of which are harbingers of great success of his to come, including in Mercury Dasha, because Mercury's in the 10th. We're moving towards that. So notice how as Mercury gets stronger, all of these Moon, Mercury, Venus get stronger in the Navamsha.
That's great. It's got those it's got Moon, Venus next to it in the Navamsha as well. Two nice benefics either side of it as well. Amazing.
Absolutely. That's it's a triple. I've never seen it. A triple Amala yoga. So he's got, it's almost like somebody could even joke and say, well, first of all, he had the martial arts. No, I don't know what it was in what order. Comedian, martial arts, and now overall podcast host.
Which
I don't know.
if you think about it, is a kind of combination of all three, isn't it? He's like a
Well, it's three. Yeah, I mean, I'm just talking along here, but it's interesting that he's had three very distinct careers here. And there's three, and I'm not saying you translate it that way. I'm just saying that's triple the popularity. So should we move on to the second?
Let's move on to the next one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So shut that one there. North, south. And the next one we're going to do is Tucker Carlson.
Tucker. Yeah.
Tucker Carlson. Yeah.
So we got Tucker Carlson, and I will give the birth data.
Okay.
Which is.
Can you see that okay?
Yes. Yeah. May. So it's May 16th, American style date, 1969, 10:07 a.m., San Francisco, California. So this is Tucker Carlson.
That's quite an accurate birth time, isn't it, as well?
It is, yes. These two are accurate. My third person, I've done a spec rectification, but it's such a spectacular chart, I had to include it. We'll probably do a little briefer on that since it's not this one. These first two charts, we know they're accurate.
Okay.
So again, a strong Venus. So we've got a Cancer ascendant. I should mention, I have written about Tucker. There's a wonderful biography that came out about him by Chadwick Moore. Came out, I think last year. It came out after actually I had written my article. But so I wrote about him right after. He was interesting. We say he was fired from Fox, but they never technically fired him. He was just told that he had no access to his emails or his office, right? He had, what is that, right?
Handed your hat on a Friday afternoon.
Yes. So they didn't want him to. They were discussing a long-term contract. And so he took, like Joe Rogan, discussing many things that weren't necessarily allowed to be discussed on mainstream news. Why? Because they have sponsors that won't allow it, or heavy control from the top. Right?
So when you look at these ones now, then, I mean, what leaps out at you as being? Are you seeing any kind of? I mean, apart from the fact that there's not much in the angular houses again, one planet in an angular house, but obviously Venus. Right. Let's see what you. Yeah. Well,
again, the same factors of very strong Venus. You've got first of all, you got a Vargatama ascendant. Again, I mentioned this in passing that he has the Sarvashtaka bindus, 37 bindus for his Cancer ascendant. So note when we get to the Navamsha, you'll see this is Vargatama. Vargatama means that the planet or the ascendant, whatever it is, repeats in the same sign in the Navamsha and sometimes other important divisional charts. So we have double whammy, a Cancer ascendant. So in other words, enormous, it's again, water, so that devotion, lifelong devotion to family, home, nation state, patriotism. So he's very devoted to his family. And so his wife of was married in 91, so it'll be 33 years. I met her at age 15, has 4 children. Totally devoted to his father. The parents split up early. I'll talk about that. But notice the ascendant is ruled by the moon. Again, what did I say before? Strong Venus, strong moon. Okay, here we have the Senate ruled by the moon. Cancer is ruled by the moon. Moon is in Taurus, exalted in the 11th house. Again, 11th house, both these, Rogan had this as well. Strong, 11th house from his moon had the Venus,
moon, yeah.
Strong Venus. So in other words, networks of friends and associates. It's great for anybody, unless you're an introvert, in which case you don't necessarily want a lot of connections. But for these people, it makes their subjects that they interview all that more successful, because they have all these friends and friends of friends, and then colleagues, and then interviewees who become friends. And so you'll notice that the depth, and I have to admit, I'm much more of a follower of Carlson. And I started writing about him from the moment he got bounced from Fox, because I wanted to know, whoa, what happened here? So, and I hadn't looked at his chart before then. I was interested in him, but I had not written about him. So here we have an exalted moon with the sun just over the wire into a bright waxing moon. So sun, moon, and Mercury in Taurus, in the sign of Venus, Venus exalted in the 9th house. Fantastic. Now it is widely conjoined Rahu, which makes it a little more turbulent and unpredictable, which is kind of his style. His style is, and that's why people love him, because he has this crazy laugh, and he'll laugh and he'll react to things. Now he has, of course, prepared material. It's not like he's totally off the cuff, but he'll give talks with no notes. I've seen him speak at, by video at different conferences where he's no teleprompter, no notes, just totally seemingly off the cuff with some prepared remarks. And it's remarkable. It's remarkable because it just kind of rolls along. And you have this gift with these different, I keep wanting to call them television journalists. And remember, in the case of Tucker, he is more, and you could say, well, Cancer and Taurus, you could say they're both maybe more conservative. He started out more of a mainstream journalist. He worked at CNN, worked at MSNBC, and then, and his father is a well-known journalist, Richard Carlson, still a very strong mentor for him. But again, he has the strong Venus because it's exalted. Venus is in Revati, in Mercury's nakshatra. And he's also, now it looks like Joe Rogan was born on a Friday as well. It says it on his, August 11th. But actually, the astrological day of Friday does not begin until sunrise on Friday in the Vedic system.
Right.
So actually, Joe Rogan is born on an astrological Thursday, calendrical Friday. Carlson has the Venus strong and born on an Friday, astrologically and calendarically.
Right.
So bang. So strong moon exalted as well.
How about Saturn being debilitated there then? Would that's
see that? Well, very interesting. I was going to discuss that in a minute. On April 24th, 10 minutes before he was to go on air, Tucker was informed that he would not be going on air. In fact, he was no longer with Fox.
Wow.
And the week before, they had settled a case with Dominion for, it was $787.5 million. And you got to remember, the major backers of TV are the big pharmaceutical companies.
Right.
So they didn't want him talking about the vaccine, or, there might be problems with the vaccine. Same with Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan it was on with Dr. Peter McCullough, and that's when Neil Young wanted to have him removed from Spotify. So it's similar. It's very, as I said, very treacherous tightrope. And hey, there are others. I mean, Steve Bannon's probably going to have to go to jail for just contempt of Congress, just to silence him. Again, Tucker was being silenced. Well, guess what happened? They couldn't silence him. Okay, I am answering your question about Saturn. Guess when his Saturn Dasha began? Now, remember, it is, this is a Nietzsche Bhanga Raja Yoga, which means the Saturn is corrected. So thank goodness for that. It means that there will be some setbacks because of Saturn. It's in the 10th house of career highs, but there can be a fall from grace with Saturn in the 10th. Now, it does not repeat in the Navamsha. Notice Saturn goes to the 12th house. And I had wondered at the time whether he would, maybe go into more private, go and write books, because he's already written several books. But Saturn Dasha began January 17th of 2022. So he was already Yeah, he was already 15 months into it. And you could conjecture, and I don't know the track record on this exactly, but many people watched him because he was a truth teller. He said things that he conveyed what people, they wanted to hear what was going on, not what somebody wanted them, not some official narrative. So you might say he was near to the chopping block for the previous 15 months. He was already, right? Because he was already in Saturn Dasha, there was if you were his astrology, you could say, there could be some setback here. The thing is, when he talks, and he's talked about this, people have asked him about it, and he's been very, very charitable. Again, the strong Venus, very charitable, didn't blame anybody. He always knew that he could be fired at any time for any of his jobs. He talks like that. Said he doesn't read what other people think because they're not important to him. I mean, he has close advisors around him that he loves. People, he's worked with his same producer for years. His business, I don't know what you call it, his business advisor, Neil Patel, who's formed some companies with him. It's the first guy he met at college. So look at this, the exalted Venus in the 11th house from the sun and moon and Mercury. And so in answer to your question, we jumped ahead a bit, but the Saturn Dasha already was going to tell us that he could have some difficulties there. But notice how he has succeeded. Even so, because why? Because he's got the chart, the construction of the chart is so strong. Now, one of the elements I said that is continuous across these three charts is that the chara, the cardinal. Now, he does not have that, except for he has Saturn and he has ascendant in Cancer. Saturn's in Aries. With a strong, it's ruled, okay, this is another saving factor. Strong Mars, we've said you've got to have a strong Mars. And the Mars is in a trinal house, a house owned by Lakshmi, in its own sign, right? And also, in his case, Jupiter and Mercury are close to their stationary degrees. Notice how Jupiter, so this is another factor we've mentioned, is common to all these charts, that Jupiter aspects or conjoins the sun, moon, and or Mercury. Right. In this case, bang, sun, moon, Mercury receiving an aspect from Jupiter, also Mars.
And Mars retrograde as well in its own sign, isn't it? So that's even sort of, and it's in the night time of the chart, so it gets like a little bit of extra power, right? Because it's at night, or below the horizon, or not? How do you?
Actually, I don't know if I'd go with that because Mars, Digbala is Digbala in the 10th house, but notice, and his wife must have a good chart because it does have technically a Kuja dosha. Kuja dosha is there's so many places, right?
Yeah.
second, seventh, eighth. Okay, for those unfamiliar, Kuja is another Sanskrit word for Mars, and it has many house positions where it's not considered good for marriage unless you marry somebody who also has Kuja dosha, which it could easily happen. So he does have it in his Navamsha chart, but his Mars, look at that, his Mars is exalted. So he's a strong Mars in both of these charts. Look at how amplified it is. And to me, I'm sorry, we're not looking at the Navamsha yet.
No, still on the Rashi.
Yeah, we're still on this. Let me make a few more points about this and then we'll move to the Navamsha. So a strong Mars, and the reason I wanted to show his Navamsha was because moving from just the Cancer ascendant and the Saturn and Aries, he moves to Cancer, of course, is a Vargatama ascendant with 4 planets in Capricorn. So the Chara theme is in Tucker Carlson's Navamsha. Right. So Chara means actively pursuing, moving ahead. Notice that's a Dana yoga as well, because you've got an angular planet, Venus ruling the 4th, and Jupiter ruling the 9th, and they're in opposition. And notice Venus, Jupiter, whenever they're together, and they're in the Rahu Ketu axis widely. Actually, Jupiter's not. Jupiter's close to Ketu. Venus is further out.
Mm.
But Venus, Jupiter always can be a bit excessive. And he did have an addiction to alcohol that he in 2002, I write about that as well.
Mm.
So he's been sober for 22 years now. So I write about that as well in December. I contrast his approach to addiction with that of Matthew Perry, the
Okay.
actor who passed away just very shortly before that. So that's also instructive about, because they were born within 2 months of each other and they both had Saturn. Yeah, people should read that if you're interested in addiction and that issue, but also to read about what is it like to have a Nichibanga corrected Saturn, such as Tucker Carlson, and an uncorrected Saturn, such as Matthew Perry. Matthew Perry's Saturn was opposite his moon. It's so much more depressive. See, notice that Tucker is very optimistic. He's bubbling, always very optimistic, even in the face of difficult things.
Mm.
So where do we get that? Jupiter at an angle from moon or aspecting the moon.
Mm.
And you got that with both Rogan and
Was Rogan's
and
Jupiter retrograding as well, or not? I can't remember now. I don't think it was.
was this what? Was this what retrograde?
Was his
Yeah,
Jupiter retrograding?
No, it's not retrograde.
So,
But it is combust. It is combust.
Oh, right. So this one's retrograde, the other one was combust. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to have
So
a
you
look
could
at
say-
the Navamsha chart now?
Sure. Moon actually is not as well placed there. And that was a very difficult. So the thing to notice is, first of all, Vargotama, so that the Cancer, so his devotion to family and country, his patriotism, his love of the United States is so apparent. I mean, he travels abroad, of course, but it's not like, and that's why I thought, well, Saturn's, his Dasha Lord's currently in the Navamsha 12th house. There's no way he's going to reside abroad. He says that, but you can't even see it. But notice the strength of the 7th house in the Navamsha. Jupiter, Venus, Sun, Mars, all in Capricorn. And you got Mars exalted, Jupiter debilitated, but it's getting correction. Why? Because it's with an exalted Mars. So notice there's a couple of ways to read the 7th house. First of all, he meets his wife when he's age 15 at a private school at which her father was the headmaster. And that was during his Mars-Mercury dasha. So notice the Mars, of course, 4th and 5th houses are houses of education. Remind me to bring that up. I should finish one topic before I bring another, but the topic of education and higher education is very interesting with all of these three people. But notice how Mars aspects Sun, Moon, Mercury, and it's also in the 7th house. So 7th house from Sun and Moon, and 7th house exalted Mars in the 7th house of the Navamsha. What could that? It means you've got. Now, he did not have a lot of partners. He had one woman that he was devoted to from age 15. It could, with some people, it could be that, right? But there's too much devotion. He watched as his mother left the family. She was a hippie. She left during Moon Saturn, by the way. And the moon is going to, moon in 8th house or in Scorpio is not going to be easy. So that was, so that's when he experienced that. But he's noticed, but that the 7th house is also your clients, or can be your audience, right? So so his wife is totally devoted to him. So instead of being an antagonist, I see that Mars in his 7th house is, he has always loved debate, and he's very well read. He's more highly educated than Joe Rogan, and has written several books. 3 books, I think we figured out. The first one being in 2003. during his Rahu moon, he wrote a book called Politicians, Partisans, and Parasites. And then another book in 2018. So that was Rahu moon, second book. So notice that Rahu is in Pisces with the exalted Venus. And then guess what's the third house is writing? Guess what's in the third house from Venus? Sun, Moon, Mercury. Right?
Right.
So that was the first book. Then the second book, Ship of Fools, How a Selfish Ruling Class is Bringing America to the Brink of Revolution. Whoa, doesn't mince words. That was published in October of 2018 during his Jupiter Mars. What's in the third house from Jupiter? Mars, strong in its own sign of Scorpio. Opposite Sun, Moon, Mercury in the house of publishing. And then his most recent book is about 2021 it came out. So that would have been at the tail end of his Jupiter Rahu Dasha, and where he, it's called A Long Slide, 30 Years in American Journalism. But you see how the Navamsha chart isn't, in certain ways, well, there's certain planets that are better positioned than others. Like the planets in angles, Moon is not handled, is not that great, but at least Moon and Saturn are in trinal relation. And also notice, and I think this is true of Joe Rogan as well, there's a Papakartri yoga to the Navamsha ascendant. In other words,
surrounded by malefics, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's surrounded by malefics. Now, you and I might say, wow, it just seems like he jumped straight into his other opportunities. But let's face it, I mean, he faced a lot of opposition, but he also has a lot of friends and supporters and people in high places. I mean, I know there are a lot of people who have tried to get him to come over to their platform. Our third person that we're going to look at also had that. Let's round it up with that last one. I mean, we could certainly go on about. I'm just trying to cover some of the main points about each one. Without further ado, into
I'm not really familiar with this guy at all. So
yeah, no, he was. I watched him over the years. A very interesting guy, born in Tehran, Iran. They left in 1989. So with the revolution, with the Islamists.
Oh yeah.
So they were forced to flee the country. They spent some time in a German refugee camp in November of 1990. That would have been during his moon dasha, so that's very fitting. Yeah, I did it. This is a speculative rectification. The reason I did this, when I looked at his chart, and he does Tucker Carlson does a very interesting interview with him. So, and what I was fascinated by was you got two highly skilled interviewers with each other. And at times, Patrick Bet-David is hammering Carlson with, let me ask you this. Let me ask you, he has a very hammer style of speaking.
Yeah, you can't so who's running the show, isn't it?
Well, it's just fun, of course. And they always, Tucker has a routine where I don't know what Rogan does, but Tucker, and he makes no secret of it. You know, well, at dinner last night, he has dinner with the people the night before, a lengthy dinner usually, and then they do the show the next day.
Yeah,
so
that's a good way to put it, guys.
Strong 11th, you know, not only friends and people. Okay, I know somebody, you should interview him, but like becoming friends, so that when they do the interview, there's a natural camaraderie. Now, there's not always that case. Like and of course, he's done national leaders and all kinds of people. I don't know if Rogan has done, has done people like that. But Carson just recently went to El Salvador and interviewed, in fact, even went to the inauguration of Bukele, the new president down there, because he suddenly managed to eliminate crime there. Yeah, so that's the whole.
So we've got this guy.
Chilling.
this Patrick.
Yeah, so look at this,
David.
look at this, talk about strong Venus. I mean, you've got a Venus which is on the degree, let's see, I wrote about it over here on the, it is, and it's also on the birth chart. Notice it's at the highest degree. It's at, now again, this is a rectified chart, but it's got to be in there right around 29 degrees of Libra. So this gets Atma Karaka status.
Right.
So highest degree, and notice the next highest degree, which is a Jaimini Raja Yoga. Next highest degree is Mars.
Right.
Venus, Mars together, by the way, very ambitious. Venus is at a stationary degree. Again, let me see. Let's see. No, it's maybe not as, sorry. Joe Rogan has it at stationary degree, but it is Atma Karaka with the Amatya Karaka. So very strong Venus. And notice, so you got Sun, Mercury, Mars. So again, the Venus theme. 4 planets in Libra ruled by Venus. Venus is in Vishaka, but got some other planets like Saturn and Moon in Venus's nakshatra, because Moon is in Bharani nakshatra, and probably it's got a Jupiter exalted. Notice neither Tucker nor Patrick but David have an easy relationship between Jupiter and Saturn the way Rogan does.
Right.
You had actually their 5th, 8th relationship. I meant to mention that with Tucker, it's got Jupiter and Virgo, Saturn and Aries. So there was some, I don't know, to me it seems just from the outside, that's usually a person has some issues reaching or being comfortable with their career goals, because they're pushed back and forth in different directions. Now in his case, as long as I think he keeps writing and doing, it's because he's a good talker, he knows he's a good talker. Other people handle the business. But it's, yeah, so notice in this case that Moon, we don't know the Navamsha, we don't know for certain. But Moon, again, Moon opposite Mars and all these, I mean, that was one of the major points I wanted to make. You've got a Jupiter exalted and you've got an angle from the Moon and an angle from all these planets in Libra. And once again, you have, and okay, what were some of the other themes was the dominance of Chara signs. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planets in Chara signs, and this is repeated in the Navamsha, maybe not quite so many.
Apart from being, he's kind of like an outspoken journalist. He's tackling difficult subjects. He's having more unusual.
He's got another. He does a similar thing to what Tucker does. In fact, he wanted Tucker to come on board and be on his platform. He's got a YouTube channel called Valuetainment.
Right.
And he does very similar, interesting interviews. I don't know if he's been on Joe Rogan or vice versa, but they certainly all know each other. I have seen him on Tucker, and I've seen Tucker on Joe Rogan. And I've noticed that Tucker has started doing longer interviews, maybe influenced by Joe Rogan.
Wow. I mean, I just don't know how they get away with that. I mean, that to me, that's the kind of that's like the opposite of what people seem to want these days. People's attention spans are very short. So amazing.
Well, I don't know if I agree with you there, because I agree that most of the time, hey, I want information on this or that, but it's like you get to know the person.
So when you're going to go back to, definitely it's the strong Moon, the strong Venus, the fact that like Mercury first, you got these 2 strong, I mean, I can't remember what he looks like as well, but he's kind of, is he sort of quite fiery?
He's a dark haired, so he's dark haired, fit, of course, Rogan is the fittest of anybody, but even they all look very healthy. They're all very masculine. They all speak well. He has a particular, I mean, there's a Mercury, Mars, Moon connection with most of them, right? Where what is the Moon, Mars is good, of course, for wealth. It speeds up the mind. Mercury, Mars speeds up the speech, can make you witty. can make you say things you regret. But
I was just sort of thinking, because like Sun Mars that close, that's like Procopa, isn't it? Like aggravated Mars. So it's like a bit fiery, a bit angry, a bit argumentative.
no, they're 25 degrees apart. So yes, in the same sign. I wouldn't say as close as to make it. What I have found, I've studied Venus and Mars together. It's one of the most ambitious combinations. And Libra too. Libra is such an interesting sign in that way, because it's about diplomacy and contracts of marriage and social contracts, but there's no one planet of peace. Mars is the planet of war, right?
Mm.
And it's the warrior and all of that. We know that. But Venus, it's not, and Libra is not. And in my book, deliberately, I have Mahatma Gandhi back to back. The chapter with Mahatma Gandhi, Libra ascendant, back to Adolf Hitler. And the reason I did that was, and they both have Venus Mars on the Aries Libra axis as well.
Mm.
And the reason I did that was because I wanted to emphasize that Venus, a Libra especially, is about someone's vision of a harmonious universe, of how they see that should be. And they can get very passionate and dictatorial about what it should be.
Mm.
Right? And I'm not saying Patrick Bet-David is that. I don't know him. I haven't followed him enough. I've watched him. All three of them have this thing. And when you look at it, when you look from the classical Aries ascendant, Cancer is the house of education, right? Fourth house, family, education. And from Cancer, Libra is the fourth house of education.
Mm.
So education is this major theme. And what I found with all three, you can just look up their bios, is they're either college dropouts, as I think Rogan was and Bet-David was. Tucker Carlson does not, he definitely is not, he tried to talk his own kids out of going to college. He believes it's useless.
Mm.
I mean, I don't think he got his degree. I mean, it depends on who's teaching and how great is the teaching.
Mm.
But he did not experience that. And he spent most of his time, I think he passed. I don't think he got a diploma, which he doesn't mind. He spent most of his time reading the books that he wanted to read. So he's extremely well read. And that David, in answer to your question, he has had and still has, I think, different business consulting companies.
Right.
Where he also is very much in favor, he still has them, I believe. And he's very much in favor of people going back to college or higher education, if not high school, after they've decided what they want to do, how they want to be oriented in life.
Should we sort of do a little summary then? Just a little summary?
Sure. I would just say that the Chara predominance, you see that in all these charts. If they're not in the birth chart, then it comes up in the Navamsha, like with Tucker. Got this amazingly strong Venus and Moon. You got strong Mars. It's either aspecting or opposition. Often conjoined the Moon. Strong Venus, as I said, sometimes being on its stationary degree, or exalted in the case of Rogan, or Atmakaraka in its own sign, in the case of Bet-David. And then you got all these other planets ruled by Venus. Strong Mercury, usually in connection with Jupiter. Then you have, now notice it's in an angle from Jupiter with Bet-David, but but it keeps remaining in an angle. Jupiter aspects to Sun, Moon, and Mercury. Dana yogas galore, high Sarvashtaka points. Bet-David has 40 in Leo, which is the 11th house again. Saturn aspecting all those planets in Libra, and 40. So friends, or in the 5th house from the Moon. And both he and Tucker were saying they would love to have, they both have 4 children. They'd love to have even many, many, many more children.
Mm. So would you say, what would be the one kind of, is there anything with all three? Because given that they've all got, I'm not saying they're similar people and physically they're all quite different, but they've all ended up doing something very similar. They've all found a niche being alternative journalists that kind of tend to deal with subjects outside of the mainstream or that would certainly, you know, kind of upset 50% of the population. So,
right.
So
well, that's the thing. I think in this era, that's what fascinated me to start looking at these. You could say, well, Jupiter and Saturn in Libra and air signs are much more conducive to journalism than Jupiter, Saturn, and water. But in these times, now you see, Rogan maybe wouldn't have succeeded in another era, but at this time, it's almost like you need the water to smooth over the rough edges.
Mm.
And so I would say the first thing that came to me when I started looking at these, particularly these 3 charts, but the same is true even with Alex Jones and with Carlson, because it's not like, oh, you might think, oh, Venus, so soft-spoken, all diplomacy and talk. No, remember that Venus is passionate about conveying what? A harmonious view of the universe. In other words, can't we just talk? Why can't we just talk? I think that's the message of this era. The people want truth. They don't want to be told canned lies or talking points that have been given at 4 a.m. that all of the journalists, I'm sure you've seen these clips where all of these mainstream news people parrot. They have not just the
same script. I've seen it. It's quite funny.
Exactly. They've all been told safe and effective. Right. That's it.
I mean, could you say that's down to like
safe and effective?
We think of Venus as being like, I always think of it as being the sort of planet of symmetry, because it's like its orbit is almost circular. Whereas all the other planets are a bit sort of like elliptical, oblate, you know, but Venus is a very sort of balanced, symmetrical, almost pure circular orbit. So there's that, and it even rules like the scales, doesn't it?
Oh, it's funny. In my 1991 book, Navigating by the Stars, I talk about the astronomical qualities of each of the planets, and then I discuss, you know, how to use them astrologically. And Venus has a very, very fierce atmosphere. I mean, toxic, right? You don't get near.
No.
You don't, right?
Yeah.
So there's something very, very fierce about the astronomical Venus. And maybe you could say there's something very fierce when social contracts don't work out. You know, so, and it's quite interesting as well that it's the Asuras and Venus, it's Shukra Shukra is another Sanskrit name for Venus. If you want to know how the secrets to immortality, you go to Shukra. So the more dangerous sides of, you know, when I say, so I'm saying, that's the amazing thing about astrology, that you're saying one thing, but you're saying another at the same time. That I would say Venus, I mean, if I had to narrow it down to one factor, obviously the Mars is strong here, the Chara, this, that, and the other. And I have reasons for saying this Venus is strong. Either it's near its stationary degree, or it's exalted, or it's Atmakaraka in its own sign, as with Bet David. So each have, we can say, okay, so what? Well, because it means they have a powerful way of reaching out to people, and they want to reach out. But that's the commonality that I see, that that you take. Okay, we're not making up anything here. We're saying what are the features of Venus? Yes, it's known in the arts, and Tucker is more. We can see from the nature, particularly if we were to look at his chart again. We keep seeing all the things. The third house from this is, you know, he's a writer. He used to write all his own monologues. I mean, in the exalted Venus in the 9th house, my goodness. You know, the 4th Lord in the 9th house. So in other words, his education was going to work out well in one way or another, right? And the family, even though the mother, it was catastrophic, she left the family when he was 6 years old. He's got a younger brother that he's very close to. It's still very close, and father remarried 4 years later. So they had he's extremely close to his father and his brother and everybody. I mean, he just says that. People say, well, how do you deal with these horrid things that people say about you? And he said, well, and his house has been, they tried to attack his house with his wife was there, I mean, he said to move a couple of times. I mean, these are serious issues. When people start doxing you and they start threatening you, because they feel that you're saying things that are, well, that they don't like. So this is why I think these people are crucial to our times, because they are dare saying, and then maybe we're not saying, well, they're correct and you're not. We're saying that they dare to bring up the difficult issues and discuss it. And because, and I've said this to you before, the fourth estate, most journalists are really not doing their job. They're not investigating. They used to call them muckrakers back in the early, I don't know if that was true in England. But then I remember hearing, hearing about that. And one of the famous ones was Upton Sinclair. And he had a wonderful quote. It's hard to get a man, or you could say a person, but a man to understand something when his salary depends upon his not understanding it.
Oh, yeah, I know that quote, yeah.
But that's what journalism is supposed to be, classically. They're not supposed to be echoing the official narrative. They're supposed to be challenging the state. That's what they're not supposed to want to go to all the great cocktail parties,
Or if they did, they're kind of a bit incognito, they kind of just keep.
Right. I mean, that's ideally the way it should be. And that's how politicians have become spineless against their lobbyists, like, hey, we're not going to fund you if you don't vote the way we say. So a lot of these things, I think, have come out in the form of, we could call these modern day muckrakers in a certain way. I hadn't planned to say that, but there's a historical, I mean, it's over 100 years later, because they're pointing out the people that don't want to admit. I mean, look what you got these NSA, Brennan and Clapper, I think is his name. Yeah, they refuse to acknowledge that the Russian hoax, Russia collusion was incorrect, that wasn't true, that the Hunter Biden laptop was actually what it was, authentic and not Russian disinformation. But they're refusing to say so. They're refusing. So I think Tucker Carlson says it very well. He says, we like to think that, he said, don't think right and left, Democrat, Republican. Think honesty versus falsehood. And we like to think we're on the side of the former.
Just sort of wrapping up a little bit now then. So thank you very much, Edith, for doing that. It was amazing. It's really interesting. It's good just to sort of go back to the nuts and bolts and just see somebody picking apart a chart. What I like to do is I like to see how people approach the problem. We all have our specialty, like we were saying earlier, and we all have our angle of attack. And it's just interesting to see other astrologers, what they're picking up on and how they're seeing it, and their general overview. And it's just good to see. I think a lot of that southern perspective, the southern chart, the southern trainings coming in as well. There, your kind of way of looking at the Navamsha, that's totally different to how I would use it. So it's just interesting for me to see all these different techniques and how people are combining and using. So just before we kind of wrap it up, I mean, how do people get hold of you? I mean, for instance, let's just go through the checklist. Number one, are you teaching people? Will you do like one-to-one, or do you do training via videos? And are you still doing consultations?
I am doing consultations. If they
that stuff, yes.
Email me, Edith at edithhathaway.com. My website is edithhathaway.com. There's I'm not doing tutorials these days, but I have a lot of written material, so my articles are free at my website. There's a web store where I think there's like at least 18 different MP3s and MP4s that people can purchase. They're pretty reasonably priced. There is an audio course that I did in 2002, which I revised, but it was originally, and that's when we were still in cassettes.
Wow.
You know,
Not
I know.
track, cassettes.
Cassettes, and then we went to CDs.
And you got a newsletter? There's a newsletter as well people can sign up for?
I do. It's out periodically, not every month. So I do have a newsletter. People can subscribe to that, check my website and see. I do have a couple of articles out recently. One is called The Long View of 2024. One is called, well, I've got one on the US election and another one on the total solar eclipse, which is also a Vedic New Year chart. So there's a lot of recent information there. Yeah, the audio course I updated it in 2015. So that is the precursor to my book, In Search of Destiny. So it's called the Vedic Chart, an expert guide through the 12 ascendants in 12 lessons. And they can get individual chapters. So it's Aries through Pisces ascendants and the power of those ascendants. So see, I mean, we're still looking at Rogan with the Taurus ascendant, Carlson with it. And notice Rogan, I mean, interesting that he is the wealthiest because, and we know his chart. Okay, we know exactly what his ascendant is, or we don't know Bette David's. But Taurus is concerned with material resources, right? So a Taurus person is going to put a lot of focus on, okay, how am I going to make sure I've got the money, you know?
And then stuff like, obviously you're on a lot of other, you've appeared in a lot of other YouTube channels, so people can check you out. Just Google Edith Hathaway and then you'll find there's lots
right.
Of, I think there's quite a lot.
This will be my most recent one now. I did one with some Italians. That's currently at the top of my, pick up to my welcome page at the top of there. So I'll have to add yours now.
Okay.
So that was with the interpreter. That was on the Amata Giovanni YouTube channel. But I was not interviewed by Amata, who does not speak. Well, her English, she said, was a little rusty. So she assigned me to Anna Valentina Lanza.
Okay.
So that was her interpreter.
It's a good interview. It's easy to follow through, and there's lots of extra information. I think you're going into the Jupiter Saturn material on there.
Right. I do that.
I mean, we'll do to that at some point, but people want to jump ahead and see that material has been presented on that video. So I'll put a link to that as well underneath. So I guess it just comes to wrap up. Thank you very much, Edith. Thank you for your time. It's been amazing. Yeah, thanks for coming on and talking.
Oh, thank you. And I think we took something from Joe Rogan's 3.
I know him a lot more than I did, or I've learned a lot about these people that I didn't know really that much about.
We just, by osmosis, we extended to his interview style, right?
Definitely.
Or length.
Yeah,
length.
Definitely. I'll leave it there. So yeah, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you very much.
All right. Hey, thank you.